Boy, we could go so many different directions in the agenda we put together for today.
Say I'm a travel writer, 3 different websites. I also have some books out and the newsletter and do some other things.
And you have very high open rates, like 56%, very high. Your click-through rates also very high.
I think at this point, there are like 116,000 subscribers, which is just insane. We average a 56% open rate. Sometimes they'll get 800 to 1,000 clicks. That's a newsletter that goes to 20,000 people. So
I mean, you sold at least one website recently.
the first site I sold was like a new BMW, and this one was like a very used BMW. So
You've been publishing on the web for a long time.
one of my sites, the one I've had the longest, is down probably 30% from where it was before the HCU.
You started Nomadico newsletter, I believe, from scratch a couple years ago.
All they had to do was mention it once in their newsletter, and we, bang, had like 1,500 subscribers after like a week.
What are the things about Substack that make it so great?
Substack just has some built-in advantages that regular newsletter services don't. The one thing I would advise if you're new at this is
All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman. Today, we're joined by Tim LaFell with Nomadico newsletter and the cheapest destination blog.com. Tim, how are you? Welcome.
good. I'm excited to be on the air. I've been listening to you for ages, so this is nice.
Yeah, you and I have interacted online for a number of years through the podcast and other means. Obviously, you're involved with TBX, the Travel Bloggers Conference. We've been together. We were just reminiscing in Louisiana. So long time coming. Great to have you. Boy, we could go so many different directions in the agenda we put together for today. You've been in this industry for a long time. We do have a great agenda, a lot we're going to cover, but maybe before we get in, can you introduce us to yourself? Tell us who you are. Give us a little backstory.
Sure. If I'm talking to normal people out there, I just say I'm a travel writer. If I'm talking to people in our business, I say I'm a publisher because I have 3 different websites for consumers and one for travel writers. And then I also have some books out and the newsletter and do some other things. And it's a little bit confusing to the man on the street, but I think that's the way our world works these days, that you got to be juggling a few different things and have multiple streams of income, or you're in trouble when the rug gets pulled out from under you, and it's always going to get pulled out from under you at some point.
The rug is constantly being pulled. We're all trying to stay on the rug while it's being pulled. And then to your point, if you do multiple things, you've got multiple rugs to stay on. So I
Yeah,
guess all
just quick
analogies
side
break
note.
down.
Just quick side note, you came to speak to T-Bex on SEO, and that was back when there were rules and we knew what to do. And now it's a little more ambiguous.
Yeah, now not only are the rules undefined to say the least, but they're constantly changing. Well, so you've got a number of places that you publish. Your newsletter, which we're going to get into and talk about, is fascinating because it's something pretty new. But I mean, you got started in this. I mean, I'm looking at my notes back in the early 2000s. We don't need a walk down memory lane necessarily, but if you could just try to, from a high level, talk about what's so different nowadays comparatively. And really what I mean is your ability to adapt, like maybe from the angle of your ability to adapt and change as time has gone on, and you're continuing to do and live the life you want, even though, all joking aside, like the landscape has completely changed a number of times. Hey, do you want to see your name and company featured in top tier online publications? Well, with Jolly SEO's expert outreach service, now is the perfect time to take advantage of it. They're offering an exclusive buy one, get one free deal, so you can double your visibility without having to double your budget. These are real, high-quality source of signal mentions that boost your credibility and your authority. So don't wait. Claim your BOGO offer from Jolly SEO today by visiting jollyseo.com/test-links. Again, that's jollyseo.com/test-links and get your BOGO offer today.
Yeah, I don't want to be that old man who talks about walking 10 miles through the snow with no shoes. It was so hard back then. But it
Uphill
is
both
important.
ways, right?
Yeah, but it is good to remember that there was no YouTube, no Facebook, no Instagram, any of that stuff. When I first started, we were all just kind of figuring it out. I saw that YouTube just had its 20th year anniversary, and I went full time a year after that in 2006, but I started back in 2003. So even though, we're facing way more uncertainty these days and things move so fast, there's just a lot more ways to make a buck. And so I think that's the big difference. Like, there were no ad networks like Mediavine and Raptive. The Amazon affiliate program didn't even exist when I started. They were the first ones, and then all these other companies piled on. And it's hard to believe that there was a time when there were no affiliate networks because it's such a core part of so many businesses. But they were the first that just said, "Hey, why don't we just pay these people commission and they'll send us traffic?" And um, what a great idea. So, there was obviously less competition. Like, sometimes I meet young people and they go, "Oh, you're so lucky you started back when, there weren't so many travel blogs." And that's true, no matter what niche you're in. But the pie is a whole lot bigger. We now have all these ways to connect with sponsors and all these automated things that you don't even have to lift a finger to make money from. So I think it's a nice world out there, even if you're just getting started right now. As long as you're patient, like, just understand that you can't go jump off a cliff after quitting your job and say, I'm going to go start an online business. It just doesn't happen that quickly. It never has.
Let's talk about where you're at right now. Maybe give us an overview on where what you're involved in. You kind of mentioned a little bit, but if you could give us a little bit more depth, anything you're willing to share in terms of specifics, just to give people a framework of what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I probably got like a dozen different income streams, which I think is healthy. But here's my commercial message. I have 3 books out that are in multiple editions. So that's something maybe we can talk about later. If you're thinking about writing a book, maybe write something that's going to either be evergreen or something that could be updated. And, after it has a run of 5 years or something, because then people start looking at the copyright date and they go, oh, it's old. So there's this natural decline over time with a nonfiction book. So anyway, that's how I first started out. I put out the first edition of The World's Cheapest Destinations, and I started a blog just to publicize the book. Basically, it was like to get journalists to notice me, maybe quote me in an article, and like the before we had help a reporter out and all this kind of things. SOS Media now. So that was the intent, and then after a while, I started getting a good audience and started finding some ways to make money. So now I run that. I run Perceptive Travel, which is a narrative publications, kind of like narrative travel stories, more literary, I guess. And there's a blog attached to that. I run one that's high end. Actually, I use a pen name. My first and middle name's Timothy Scott. That one's called Luxury Latin America, and that's it's probably the one that makes the most money because it's about tours and hotels that cost a lot of money. And and then I run one that goes with this book. That's just travelrunning2.com, and that's where it's kind of like inside baseball stuff. I interview other writers and editors and talk about tactics. So it doesn't get a lot of traffic, and I don't even have ads on there. It's more like just to raise my profile and sell a few books here and there. And then the Nomadico newsletter on Substack, which we'll probably go into in more depth. I started that with the guys who run Recommendo. Kevin Kelly, a lot of people have heard of. He was one of the founding editors of Wired. He's got a lot of books out, futurist type kind of books. And he and I started that together right after the pandemic started waning. And it's for working travelers, basically people that can work from the road and like to travel. And that's pretty broad, but at least it's well defined of who it's for.
You've kind of made a life out of traveling, and I know a lot of people listening long to create income that allows them to have freedom, whether it's freedom in location, whether it's freedom in hours worked or when they work. Can you share a bit more about how you've structured what you do so that you're able to travel, and maybe talk about how that's had an impact on your growth over the years?
Yeah, another podcast I listen to regularly besides yours is the Tropical MBA, and they had one on there recently, like how do you define rich? And Ian was saying, like, if you've got $10 million but you have no time to do anything you want, then that's poor. Like, it doesn't matter how much money you have. And so I've kind of always felt that, like, the way you define a rich life is to have control over your life and control over your time and not have to ask to go on vacation or not have to ask to go see your kid's school play or whatever, or your kid's baseball game, whatever it happens to be. And being able to just spontaneously take off or go shopping on a Tuesday afternoon, all those kind of little things that corporate people often don't have. We as all business owners, as solopreneurs or whatever, we can have control over that and also have control over our stress level to some extent. Like there's all these factors beyond our control that create stress, but we have control over how big a team we have and how big our business scales and all that kind of thing. And I think there's some value in putting a limit on that and kind of avoiding the pressure to grow, grow, grow all the time. Because if you're coasting along, making enough money to make a living, pay the bills, go on vacation when you want, and, you know, have a rainy day fund, do renovations to your house, whatever, then, that's kind of the dream. And I think a lot of people that are making a lot more money are just like stressing themselves out and working themselves to death. And they wake up in their 50s and they go, wait, I haven't done much.
Yeah. Hmm. I think we're gonna hear that thread throughout the interview, like just knowing where we're going with what we're talking about and stuff. So I just wanted to ask about it at the outset. Okay, let me ask you first and foremost. Like I said, there's so many things we could do, so many ways we could go. We're gonna get into talking about Nomadico and the Substack newsletter. I think that's really interesting because it's somewhat of a fairly new sort of thing for you. But talk first, if you could, about some of the websites you've sold. And for those of you listening, keep your ears tuned because I mean, you sold at least one website recently that I know of. This isn't just something that is, from 10 years ago or 5 years ago, a practice that maybe people feel like is not in vogue nowadays. Like you've sold several websites throughout the years, and one of them was pretty recently.
Yeah, so I sold one about 9 years ago. We'll circle back to that, but I sold one recently, to another guest who was on the podcast, Chris Christensen. He runs the Amateur Traveler podcast, but he also now runs 3 websites. He already had one for his Amateur Traveler podcast that also had articles on it, and then he has one about California travel, and he added this one on, uh, to just kind of diversify his portfolio. It's a good affiliate play. People do a lot of hotel bookings on there. And it's multiple writers, so he's not like, spending tons of time on it. And that's maybe one thing to start with. It's pretty easy to sell a site if you're not the focus of it. Like it's far easier to sell a site called Hotel Scoop, which that one is, than it is to sell Tim Leffel's favorite hotels. So just keep that in mind if you're starting a new business. There's a temptation maybe to insert yourself into it and all this talk about personal brand and whatever, but you can have a personal brand without naming your website your own name. So I do know a couple people that have managed to sell their site with their name in it, but it's much tougher. So anyway, that kind of came about in a strange way because he worked in the tech industry for TripAdvisor and Amex and all these people. And so I was just asking him, do you know anybody who would want to buy this for a strategic reason, thinking like, somebody like Expedia or Booking or TripAdvisor, whoever might be interested, and how would I find those people? And he's like, actually, I just retired and I got this big payout and I'm kind of looking to pick up another site. So how much are you asking for it? And so it was a very easy deal. Like if they could all be like that, that people could sell their sites all the time. But that just happened to be somebody I knew already that was a friend of mine. So it was fairly easy and we didn't quibble a lot on the price. I just told him the price tag I had and how I justified it. And we didn't really haggle much. Um, but, I sold it to him for a reasonable price. So uh, people ask how much I made, and I'm not really supposed to give the exact numbers, but I always say the first site I sold was like a new BMW, and this one was like a very used BMW. So it was not life-changing money by any means, but I had a lot of things I wanted to do with it. Like, so I wanted to work on a roof deck on my house. I had some bills to pay and, some preventative healthcare things we wanted to pay cash for and stuff like that. So I feel like as long as you know what you're doing with the money and you're kind of done with the site in terms of like, it's not exciting you as much anymore, maybe, or you got too much on your plate and you want to take some money off the table, then it's worth looking into that, which is another reason to have more than one site. Then you can kind of just peel off one and sell that asset, which is nice. then the one I sold 10 years ago or 9 years ago, I did through Latona's, which is a brokerage. And I think you had people from Empire Flippers and Quiet Light and some of the others out there. There's a bunch of them. Flippa's another one. Um, they all kind of do the same thing, but they had different specialties and different levels of deal size and things like that. But I can't remember how I got connected with those guys at Latona's, but they did a good job. I would recommend them. They actually tried to tell me to bring my price down a little bit because I was charging a 4x multiple, but I did not listen to them and I actually got it in the end. So maybe there's another lesson. Stick to your guns if you think it's worth more. The reason I thought it was worth more is because it was a site about travel gear. So I was getting like tons of, travel
Oh,
clothing and luggage and all this stuff. And I felt like that was worth something. They didn't, but I thought a buyer might. And I was right. Like that was what attracted the buyer to it. He's like, "Oh man, this is awesome. Like I do all this hiking and camping and I would love to get free hiking shoes and tents, whatever." So, if you do have something like that, or your social media is worth money, or your newsletter is worth money, then that can allow you to charge a bit more.
yeah, I interviewed somebody a couple months back who has a popular Instagram account, across some different things, and talked about how to them the free stuff they received is really valuable. Maybe to others it wouldn't be, but for them it's a definitely a perk of the Instagram account that they run. Well,
Yeah,
congrats
maybe,
on
like if you're selling to private equity and it's like a couple $1 million site, that's not going to be the case.
yeah.
But for something small, it will.
It's also well, and we'll get to it. Partly part of how you've worked through, one of your website sales was basically within your network, and it speaks to the power of kind of developing a personal network. You didn't start a personal brand, but you kind of used your personal brand that you built up over the years to find a buyer. And so I think there's some interesting things there. We'll get into that later because we got some things to talk about with that. I want to get into the Substack email newsletter you have, Pneumatico. It's funny. You called me. Luckily, I didn't do it, but my autocorrect is continuing in my agenda to turn into Nomadic newsletter, and it's autocorrecting it. It's Pneumatico newsletter, if you're wondering. And I almost said it wrong at the intro. You started Pneumatico newsletter, I believe, from scratch a couple years ago. And let's spend some time in that. I mean, email newsletters are something we've talked about on the podcast a decent amount. You specifically chose Substack. You specifically partnered up with someone. Like, let's get into the foundational elements of this and kind of talk through how you grew it.
Sure. So first of all, I've got a bunch of different newsletters because I run all these different sites and have books and whatever. So this wasn't my first rodeo, but it's the one that's taken off the most, and I think that's interesting because I think the platform has something to do with that. I don't think it's because I suddenly hit on a brilliant idea and nailed the template or whatever. I think it's because Substack just has some built-in advantages that regular newsletter services don't. And one of those is that it has this network effect. So I, when I started it, I did it with a partner, as I mentioned, and I think that was a really good move in the long run because that kind of gave us a head start. They were already running this newsletter called Recommendo, where they're recommending all kinds of things like for your house or for your life or whatever. And sometimes they touch on travel. And so this one's exclusively travel and living abroad. But what that did was kind of give us a jump start from the beginning because all they had to do was mention it once in their newsletter, and we bang had like 1,500 subscribers after like a week. And so that was a good way to start. And then, over the years, every once in a while, I'll mention it again. We'll get into a little spike. But a lot of the growth has just been organically through Substack. We don't have any kind of lead magnet and never have. We haven't spent a dime on advertising. And, I'll every once in a while I'll mention on social media and I'll put it in my own blog and whatever, but that's not where most of the growth has come from. Most of the growth has come from other people recommending us or mentioning us in an article or it's through Substack itself. They have their own, like, if you like this, you'll probably like that kind of recommendation engine that people are familiar with from Amazon or whatever. And it really works. I mean, basically, if people are subscribing to another newsletter that's kind of similar or related, then they'll end up seeing ours at some point as a recommendation. And so every day we get 15, 20, 25 new subscribers without lifting a finger, which is a beautiful thing. I mean, there's not even any kind of pop up anywhere or anything like that. It's just the way you wish it would work with your regular newsletter.
When you started it, did you have a goal in mind? Was it something where you had a target audience and you're speaking to a specific audience and you had a goal with whether it's I'm going to send an email every week, or I want to grow this to 10,000 subscribers, or I wanted to earn this much money through this monetization method? And then as you've grown it, what has ended up being the metrics you kind of evaluate it by? Maybe you just sit down and send an email every week. Like, I'm just curious where you started and then where it's developed into in terms of how you define its success.
Yeah, we have put out an issue every Thursday for whatever 180 some weeks or whatever it is. So yeah, that was always the goal from the start was to have it be incredibly consistent, the same time roughly every Thursday morning it goes out. And it's just four quick bites. Some of them are news related, like what's happening in the travel world. Some of them are recommendations for products. Some of them are links to articles that I think are interesting or useful. So it's kind of broad in that sense, but I mean, it's just four quick bites each week and then some ads at the bottom. And so it's very easy for somebody to get through. Like I get some newsletters that I love that I kind of set aside. I set aside because they're going to take me and I have 15 minutes or 20 minutes to get through them. Whereas this is meant to be something that opens up in your email. You skim through it, you click on what you want, and then you move on. And yeah, I did have a goal to hit 10,000 subscribers, and we got to that in year two at some point. Um, and that number was kinda because I run a lot of newsletters, connected to my sites that are around that number or less, and it seems like that's kind of a plateau, and it's also a magic number in a bad way for MailChimp and Aweber and those kind of programs because they charge you, like, twice as much when you pass 10,000, and
Yep.
so there's kind of like an incentive to keep it below that, actually, keep your list clean because when you go over, it's suddenly gonna go up. The other beauty with Substack is you don't pay anything. So if you're starting out right now and you've got, 10 people you can subscribe, you don't have to like choose the free version versus the paid version because there's only one version. And basically the way Substack makes money is they take a percentage from your paid subscribers. So if you have, 20 paid subscribers paying $8 a month, then Substack will take 10% of that. And that's how they make their money, which is a radically different business model than Kit or MailChimp or Aweber or ConvertKit or anything, whatever, Constant Contact. Like they all charge you per user, per subscriber, which is for me, I think kind of a perverse incentive, disincentive. But anyway, that's how they work.
You've talked multiple times about how Substack is a unique platform and one that has really helped you a lot. And we talked with Jamie last year, and we went into depth on Substack. But it's been a year or so, maybe 9 months, whatever it was, since we talked about Substack specifically. What are the things about Substack that make it so great? You talked about their monetization method, so that's really cool. I have some questions about paid versus free subscribers, but what other factors have you noticed about Substack that made it such a good platform?
Well, they've kind of avoided the impulse to have feature creep, it seems like. So it's a very simple interface. Some people would say too simple, but they're not trying to get you to open up like 20 different subsets of your list and do all this, autoresponders of like 10 messages to 10 different groups and all this stuff is meant to be simple instead of complicated. And I think for a lot of us writers, that's really attractive. Like we don't need all those other features and don't want them most of the time. And, we want stats. We want to know how we're doing, but we don't need like, super, super nitty gritty stats. We just need to know what's working and what's not. And so I think a lot of these systems email systems are meant for e-commerce people rather than publishers and Substack's meant for publishers. And so I think that kind of sets it apart. And there are a lot of journalists on there, like real legit news journalists who left Bloomberg or New York Times or Washington Post and whatever. And so I think it's seen as a serious platform. Like it's not a platform where people are just sending out spammy junk. It's seen as a platform where people who have something to say start a newsletter. So I think for us writers and publishers, that makes it attractive. It's a good neighborhood to be in.
Talk about how you landed on your approach to this newsletter. You said you have newsletters that you receive that you like, that you set aside 15 minutes to read. They're long, they're lengthy. Yours is not that. It's really simple to read, scannable. How did you land on that? How is it working for you in terms of the metrics you'd pay attention to, whether it's open rates or click through rates? And then you mentioned ads at the bottom. I think I heard that correct. How are
Mhm.
you monetizing it? If you could go into any information on that.
Yeah, so, the format was no great stroke of genius on my part. That's the way Recommendo's already set up, our partner, and it was working for them really well. I think at this point, they're like 116,000 subscribers, which is just insane. But anyway, it was working for them, and we said, "Let's just apply the same format and see what happened." And it took off, it worked really well. I do other newsletters that are long and, more in depth, but, um, this one kinda works, and the advantage of that is it doesn't take very long to put together. It's like an hour a week and I'm done, which is nice, including, figuring out the ads and all that. So, for the monetization, yeah, we also copied their, formula, which was to put unclassified ads, they're called, at the bottom because they could be anything. But, those are direct advertisements, and we might raise the price at some point, but for right now, they're $75 for 1 week or 200 for 4, which is not, any big stretch for somebody to take a flyer on, and see if it works. And we've had a lot of people that have done 1 week or 4 weeks and then come back and renewed because it worked for them. Because we do have a very high readership open rate and click-through rate, and you asked about that. We average a 56% open rate, which is
Hmm.
crazy high compared to every other newsletter I got. I wish they
Yeah.
all had that kind of rate. So I think part of that is Substack manages to get through to people's inboxes pretty well, but also it just shows that people are engaged and they care and they open it up every week, which is what you want, right? And so I cleaned up my list a little bit now and then, but not much. I probably am due for that again, but I've never gone in and like massively hacked, 20% of it or anything, just trimmed it now and then. So yeah, that's been good. And the click through rate is crazy high. Like we'll put Amazon affiliate ads in there when we're recommending a product, and sometimes they'll get 800, 1,000 clicks. And that's a newsletter that goes to 20,000 people. So yeah, that's a huge conversion rate. And they buy stuff, so like that's a big part of our income too. So I would say it's direct ads, it's the affiliate links, and then we also do have paid subscribers. So if you want, we can go into that. We don't have a huge number, like 100 or so, but that's another additional income stream that's valuable for sure.
Well, it was next on my list to ask about. Substack, paid, free can be confusing if you're not used to Substack. You did a good job explaining how they differ and what they do to monetize on the Substack side of things, how they make their money and stuff. But talk through as a brand the choices you need to make when it comes to having a paid version versus a free version, how you guys approach that, what you've seen work with that. I know a lot of people, based on that last interview we did, had questions around that topic.
Yeah, I think it's something we could probably do better. I read a lot of interviews with other Substack people, and a lot of them have tried like 8 or 10 different things before they've found the magic formula. So I don't know if there's one right answer for anybody. Um, what we do is we give away a free ebook that's like a collection of tips from our first 2 years, and it's basically a curated list in a PDF. Um, they get that for free, and then I do a quarterly video call with all the anybody who wants to attend with the paid subscribers, and they can ask whatever they want over the course of an hour. But honestly, I think at least half the people, they're just doing it to support us, which I've heard that from a lot of other newsletter subscribers too. Like they like what you're doing, they want to support you, and it's like $8 a month or $80 a year. That's not going to break the bank. And so I think there are just some people that are kind-hearted in that way. And if they find something they like, they want to contribute. It's kind of the equivalent of Patreon, I guess, but they kind of join a private club by doing that. And I think we could probably do more. We could probably offer some kind of other incentive, but um, I don't know. I don't know how much it would move the needle, and we need to experiment more and try it probably. But a lot of people, what they'll do is free subscribers will get some content and paid subscribers will get more. But I think with the kind of newsletter I'm doing, that wouldn't make a difference because the whole point of it is it's easy to skim and, get through it. So you don't want to give them more. Like that's not what they're asking for. So, yeah, I can't say I found the magic formula, but it's another income stream anyway that helps the total.
How are you growing the newsletter? You mentioned you're getting daily subscribers. Is there an active kind of approach to that, or is there something involved in the Substack side of things, or is it your partnership? Like, where are most of the new subscribers finding you from?
Yeah, it's from Substack itself, or it's from people recommending us either through Substack or through their own newsletter or through their own article that they publish or something like that. And then, of course, I mention it now and then. But the only time we see a big spike is if somebody mentions us in an article. Uh, and then, yeah, we'll see something from that. And I don't know, there's some search engine traffic, I guess, because we show up near the top if people put in our exact name. There's a couple businesses that have that name, like co-living facilities or something, but we're the only content site with that name. So we do get some search traffic, I'm sure, and those people convert. But if this were my full-time job, I would be doing a lot more experimenting and testing and trying different things and probably actively going and reaching out to other newsletter publishers and saying, "Hey, will you recommend us? We'll recommend you." I've gotten some offers like that, but they're usually way off base, and so I say, "No, I don't think this is really right for us." I don't think car repair has much to do with our travel newsletter for people trying to live abroad. So, yeah, I mean, there are people that this is their main gig, and they probably are a better source of information on that than I am. What can you do to really put your foot on the gas and grow faster?
Yeah. Last question on Nomadico. I think we'll see if that turns out to be accurate. You mentioned you have very high open rates, and I'll double down on that and second that. Like 56%, very high. Your click through rates also very high. What do you? I mean, what do you attribute that to? The style of the email that you have, very very simple, very easy to read. Is it the type of content you're doing? Have you ever found the connection there? There's lots of people who are sitting there with 22% open rates, 15% open rates right now, probably begging me to ask you that question. Like, what are some tips if you run several newsletters you must have experience to increase open rates, increase click-through rates, things people can try, etc.?
Yeah, so first of all, I should say that, yeah, that's really high, but my other ones I do run do usually get at least 30%. And I'd say, 35 is probably the average. So I managed to get a pretty decent open rate on the others as well. And I think part of that is just being authentic and real and having a voice and not being afraid to state your opinion, even if it's going to make 50 people unsubscribe. Like, I think it's better to do that in some ways and kind of like make sure you've got the right audience than to try to please everybody. And, I've had people write me really nasty emails in response to something I've published. And I go, okay, this isn't for you then, bye. It's like, you weren't paying anything. Go find something else to read. And so, I feel like, if people know you're for real and they could trust you and that you're not just a mouthpiece for the industry or whatever, then they're more willing to click on what you recommended and buy what you recommended. And that's probably something to touch on too. I don't think I've ever recommended something that I haven't used. Like, most of the time, what I'm talking about in terms of travel gear or tricks or credit cards that I've used or whatever, it's stuff that I'm taking with me and I'm on the road, like, 5, 6 months a year when I add it all together. And when I'm not on the road, I'm based in Mexico most of the time. So I've got a lot of experience with this stuff. And I'm not just saying, oh, this aromatherapy company sent me this candle and you should buy it. It's like, it's really stuff that I think is genuinely useful. And a lot of times I'm recommending things that are like 10, $15. It's not like I'm telling them go buy this $800 suitcase. It's not, it's clear that I'm not just doing it for the affiliate revenue. It's something that I use and think is worth the money.
Good transition point there. You're not just doing the Nomadico newsletter, although it's fun to hear how you've started it. I believe you said you started in 2022. It's I think 20
Yeah,
20,000
mid
plus subscribers.
2022. So probably 3 years now.
3 years now. It's over 20,000 subscribers, right? It's doing pretty
Yeah.
well. But you got lots of other streams of income. I mean, I got a long list here. I want to touch on. Maybe I'm going to mention books that you've published. You held up three of them. You have travel websites. I think that I know of three that you have that are
Hmm.
active, and probably some other monetization methods. Maybe let's move into books. I mean, a lot of people listening are content creators, right? Like that's a core theme of the listenership of this podcast. We talk about it a ton, yet I find it's rare to talk to people who have published books. What caused you to publish a book, a second book, a third book? How has that monetized for you? What have you found worth it from it? What have you found? Any tips you can share about it?
Well, I'm a male and haven't had a baby, but I think writing a book is probably a similar process to that because it could take you 9 months and then it's very painful when it comes out. But but the difference between writing a book and having a kid is like once it's out, it can generate passive income for years and bring you lots of other opportunities. And so you
The
still have to
kids just
market
cost
it.
you money at that point.
Yeah, it doesn't keep costing you money. I mean, you still have to market it, but it's pretty passive income after a while. It kind of takes on a life of its own, and especially Amazon's pretty good about recommending books that are similar. As long as they've seen some action on your book, they'll recommend it next to others, and so there's a good discovery process there. So yeah, I'm a big believer in books. People are still reading a lot of books, man. I go to resorts for my job sometimes where I have to write about them, and I'm always looking at what people are doing around the pool, And of course, a lot of people are on their phone, but man, I'd say like half the people at the pool are still reading a book, which is good to see. Um, so, as much as you may read about the decline of reading and all that, there's still millions of people buying books every month. And so I think they're useful, and you can go into a lot more detail in a book, of course, than you can in a article or a series of articles, but also it makes you an expert. And I think they're kind of magic in that sense. Like when I pitch people from SOS Media or Quoted or something like that, where journalists are looking for a source, I feel like they take me way more seriously because I'm an author. And I'll actually get calls out of the blue from journalists like NPR will call up and say, "Hey, I'm doing a piece on blah, blah, blah. Will you, give me a few quotes?" And that doesn't happen usually if you're just a blogger or you're a freelance writer, but it does happen all the time if you're a book author because it's very clear you know a lot about that subject. And in this case, it's usually about living abroad that they're calling me about or the cheapest places to travel. And so I've clearly made myself an expert in that. So I'll get these things out of the blue and I'll get freelance writing gigs out of the blue because of it too. So, I think a book has value beyond the monetary part, but the monetary part is pretty good. Like in the old days, I've done some traditionally published books where you go through a, regular traditional publisher and you get like a 10% royalty after you've met the advance. And it's a pittance unless you're Stephen King, So really, it's not a good path to go through a traditional publisher unless you're going to have a blockbuster or you're looking for that prestige factor because, it is more prestigious to say you're published by Doubleday or Penguin or whatever than, your own publishing company. But I think on Amazon, people don't care, they don't care where it came from.
Yeah.
They just want good information. And so you're on an equal footing on those sites and, or Kobo or whatever. So, it doesn't make me a ton of money, but it's a nice chunk of change every month. It generally ranges from like 500 to 1500 for the books added together. And then I have consulting options on top of that. I have like a private club for the living abroad one where they do conference calls with me. So there's ways also to monetize beyond just what you're getting from the book royalties.
What would you recommend to someone who is looking to publish a book independently? So not going down that traditional publishing route, but kind of go straight to an Amazon. Um, what are some key factors to make it successful?
Well, I would first of all, this option didn't used to exist, but now you can go through something called Ingram Spark and get into regular bookstores too, as long as you're willing to give the traditional discount that most publishers do and accept returns. So there's a little risk there, but you can now get it into regular bookstores just like any other publisher can if you go through Ingram Spark, and that's a division of the largest book distributor in the world. So I just wanted to bring that up because, don't let it hold you back that you think you're only going to be on Amazon. But you can do that and go direct to Amazon, their KDP program. The one thing I would advise if you're new at this is please hire out to professionals. It's very cheap these days to get a professional to design a book cover, to proof your book for typos. I mean, there's Grammarly and everything else. Word itself has a spell check, but it misses stuff. You need another human set of eyes on it, and get someone to format the book. Um, get them to format it for print, format it for Kindle. All of that added together will cost you less than $500, probably less than 300, because you can get somebody on Upwork or Fiverr or whatever to do this stuff. And maybe they live in the Philippines or Croatia or whatever. But when it comes to design, especially, it doesn't really matter where they are, and they'll do a great job. And on those platforms, you can see other people's reviews, you can see the work that they've done already, and so I strongly advise that. It's so much cheaper than it used to be to get help for things like that. And then basically you just have to follow all the rules and go through the process. Sometimes they'll kick the book back to you because the pages formatting's off or you didn't have enough bleed or, whatever. But as
Yeah.
long as you follow their instructions to do everything right, then you'll be off to the races. And the big advantage of self-publishing is it's super fast. You can go through that whole process of uploading the book and a few days later you're live. Whereas when you go through a traditional publisher, once you submit the manuscript, you might be waiting a year or a year and a half before it actually sees the light of day, and that can be frustrating.
Mm. Um, you have websites. You have three more in the travel space. You've been publishing on the web for a long time. Talk about where your websites are at now. Heaven knows, it's been a journey with content sites and websites in general. Maybe touch on how some of the more recent updates have had impacts for you in terms of web publishing, whether it's HCU or subsequent updates, whether you want to go into AI. I just want to give you a nice high level question there as it relates to the sites you publish on.
Yeah, so I was not hit as badly as a lot of people, and I thank my lucky stars for that. I think some of it maybe are some of the factors were maybe things I had control over, but some of them were just plain luck. And anybody that says differently is probably taking too much credit for themselves. But anyway, one of my sites, the one I've had the longest, is down probably 30% from where it was before the HCU. But then another one, mine is up more than that. And then the others were basically flat. So I think I kind of took a little bit of a hit overall, because we did lose all of us, to the AI overviews and all of that. Like, even if you're in the number one spot, you're not getting as much search traffic as you used to. So even if your ranking stayed the same, you've lost some traffic from that. But you know, I've always been harping on everybody to have multiple traffic sources, multiple websites, multiple sources of income. And I think that just became hugely apparent that was important after the HCU, because I do know other people that, like, one site lost 90% and then one didn't lose anything, and it wasn't because they were doing anything differently. It's just, one was maybe out with the bathwater and one wasn't. And so, um, I do feel fortunate. I've managed to keep rolling. I mean, my income hasn't really gone down because I found ways to make up for the traffic or make up for the income in other ways. My media buying income's definitely down, but I was never one of those people that depended on that as my, main source of income that I'm going to pay all the bills with. It was always just one of many. So, I'm feeling pretty fortunate, pretty healthy. I'm sure over time, these threats are going to keep continuing to affect our traffic. But I was always really all in on email, and I've gone even more all in with email marketing. I've invested a little bit more time in Pinterest, Facebook groups, Facebook pages, all that stuff. But I think what helped me, I would like to talk about that for a minute, because I've written about this on the Travel Rain blog, like what's really working these days and what's not in the blogging world. And I think um, those people that cranked out listicles that looked like everybody else's listicles, it seems to me those are the ones that got hurt the most. And I don't have any scientific evidence for that, but just for my anecdotal observance, if you were writing articles that were barely different than everybody else's articles, um, that that was something that worked great for a while and doesn't work at all anymore, I don't think, especially if they're articles that an AI bot can write. So every time I'm getting ready to put up something, when I have an idea, I think to myself, oh, is this something an AI bot could write and do a reasonably decent job? And if the answer is yes, I don't produce it, because I just don't think there's a point in it anymore. So what I have been doing, I was always doing, but I'm doing more of this, is to write really either super niche articles that appeal directly to my audience and maybe nobody else, or things that are really based on personal experience where I have expertise that other people don't have. And I've written things that have gone straight to the top 5 in Google over and over again. And maybe the search traffic isn't huge, like maybe the potential for that phrase that people are searching for is only 100 hits a month or whatever. But still, I'd rather be number one for something that gets 100 a month than be number 50 for something that gets huge traffic. So for me, that's worked pretty well. And the site of mine that went up is Perceptive Travel, and it's all like quirky, offbeat, weird stuff that most people are covering at all. Like, we've written about places on there where you can't find anything else about it online unless it's on Wikipedia. So we've done really well with those articles because we've kind of forged a path that nobody else has forged. And we've always like written about specific tours or specific experiences instead of like a roundup of like the 20 best things to do in Omaha, because maybe there aren't even 20 great things to do in Omaha, and maybe your article should have 3. So that's one good thing that's come out of all this. I think maybe people are dialing it back a little and not playing that game of trying to outrank each other with 24 things instead of 21. I know you've talked about this before.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a bit actually. That's funny to hear you say. Um, I mean, we've had a decent number of travel focused individuals on this podcast over the years. It's such a big space, and it's also a space that is very attractive to people who want to change the way that they are living their life. And as we kind of start to come to a close here, I just wanted to ask you about that because you do tend to live a nomadic lifestyle, right? Like that's really important to you. I know from meeting you, we talked about that, and you're a big traveler yourself, and you also have a lot going on. I mean, we've talked about newsletters and websites and books and advertising and all these different things that you do. Like, how do you balance it all? And how have you prioritized your lifestyle versus all the different things you could be spending time on day in, day out in your business?
Yes. So I don't think I've ever brought this up on a podcast before, but I used to be in a band in college, and one of our rules when we were doing a cover song was we had to be able to do it when we'd had like 3 or 4 beers in us. So nothing too complicated. And so I think my writing life is kind of like that in the sense that my job looks really complicated, but I want to be able to go to Europe for 2 or 3 months and travel around and not have to worry that my business is going to fall off a cliff or the wheels are going to come off or whatever. So yeah, I'm juggling a lot of things, but I can definitely ease off the gas and coast for a while, and the world's not going to end. So part of the way I do that is I do have some help, some part-time helpers. I've got somebody that handles my social media. I've got somebody that does sales for an agency that I run, which we didn't even talk about, but it's a blogger agency. And then I have someone who's like a sub editor, and she like posts a lot of stuff that's already written, and she does some writing too. So that's part of it. I actually have gone off the grid a couple times for a week or two and just front loaded everything that I needed those people to do. The other part is like I don't have a crazy publishing schedule. Most of my sites that I do myself, we put up like one new article a week. It's nothing crazy. And then the ones where I have multiple contributors, maybe we do 3 a week. But I just try to keep things going up consistently, but not an extreme amount. And then more of what I've been doing since the HCU is tweaking old articles and updating and republishing those because I feel like, once you reach a point of like having hundreds of articles on your site, do you necessarily have to be like going back to the well every time and starting over? Like there's a lot of stuff, that you probably published years ago that is still good, but it's a little dated. You just need to update it, put some new pictures, maybe update the prices, things like that. So, yeah, I mean, one good and bad thing about travel is it's always changing, but I think there's always new things to talk about and new discoveries and whatever, but there's also an advantage to going back and saying, that was a pretty good article. It's like 85% there, but it needs to be. I just need to like put that other 15% in and put it back out there. And Google will usually reward you for that, in my experience. I mean, it would go from like 3 hits a week to like 300 just like that because in Google's eyes, that's a new article. You just redirect the old one to the new and you're good to go. And so, yeah, I mean, there's always an issue with balance, but I think I've found a pretty good one. And um, I also adhere to that thing where there's like three important things you need to do each day, and maybe four if you're pushing it, and the rest is on your when I'll get to it
Hmm.
to-do list, like what's really going to move the needle each day. And maybe it's a new article, maybe it's finalizing an ad deal, whatever. And then the rest of it can, just get to it when you get to it. And I'm definitely not an inbox zero guy. I mean, I admire people that can do that, but I get back to stuff when I can get to it.
Um, Maybe final question from me. Where do you let AI fit into your day to day as a travel writer, as a traveler, and just what recommendations do you have for people, whether they're in the travel space or not, as it relates to AI and how it plays a role in the business?
Yeah, I've been to a couple talks on AI. You probably had too, where they always ask, raise your hand if you're using AI for anything. And all the people that don't raise their hand are lying, because you use it if you use Canva or Grammarly or any these other tools, that help you do a better job, or any video editing program. But I am kind of annoyed that AI has been applied to all our creative endeavors and not applied to the places where we have drudgery in our life. I really want a robot to help me with that crap. But anyway, I do use it to make outlines a lot, because I first of all, that saves some time, but I also want to know if I'm missing something obvious. So if I'm going to write an article that I know is going to be kind of complicated, like 2 or 3 thousand words, I will go to an AI tool, and the one I use is called Koala, and it pulls in from Claude and ChatGPT and all these others. You can kind of choose which one you want, and they'll create an outline first, and then you can edit the outline and then have them write the article if you want. But half the time, I don't even go to the next step. I just use the outline. But if I do write the article, I have them write the article, I'll read through it and see if there's anything I want to pull. And generally, if I do pull anything, it's like 5 or 10%, because they're getting better and they'll keep getting better, but it's still crappy writing for the most part. And they have certain cliches they use over and over again. It's so annoying. And so I would never straight out publish something that comes out of AI. And when I read stuff like that, I can tell in an instant that that's what they've done. And the second part of that is Google is rewarding expertise and personality, personal experience, and original material. And you got to think that they're going to get better too at spotting this stuff. And so, um, it kind of worries me to rely too much on it. And I would rather just sit down and crank out an article based on what I know to be true than to go use their stuff. And even for fact checking, you can't rely on it. That's the problem. You still got to go fact check everything that they put out, because it's so wrong half the time. So for me, it's not a crutch. It's just like one more tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, speaking of 21 things to do in Omaha, I mean, half of them wouldn't even be open anymore, you know?
Yeah, I've done ones on my own city just to check. That's always a fun experiment if you want to see how accurate it is. And always there's places that are closed. They'll recommend places for breakfast that don't even serve food. It's just a coffee shop, stuff like that.
Or places that are known for actually being terrible,
Yeah,
and like
right.
we would never go there. Yeah, I know. I've done similar types things like that. I had a friend come to visit in my town recently, and they're like, "Here's what ChatGPT says I should do," and I'm like, "That'd be a terrible way to see my city." Um, but I suppose I can see why they recommended that. So, anyways, I digress. Man, Tim, trying to balance all the stuff we could talk about into one interview was probably the hardest part of this whole thing. I mean, there's so many different ways we could go. You've been so involved. I mean, it's 2025 when we do this interview. You've been in this space for so long. So I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing about all the different things. I really wanted to try to touch on all the different things that you're doing right now, and kind of give the listeners a real kind of window into how you're able to balance so much, but yet still live a lifestyle and run a business that does suit that lifestyle. So I hope we kind of did that. Um, where can people follow along with you? Where would you like to direct people? And we'll make sure to include those links as well in the show notes.
Well, we talked about the cheapest destinations blog and the Nomadico newsletter. If you want to just follow along with me on socials or see articles I've written or whatever, just go to timleffel.com, and that links out to everything else. On that travel writing site, I do actually have an article about Substack. I think it's the most recent one, where it's got some screenshots from my dashboard, so you can kind of see, uh, some of the click-through rates and things like that if you're interested. And I just wanted to point out one thing when we were talking about balance. If you do what you love, it's a whole lot easier to work a lot of hours. And when I'm on the road, I'm only working 10 or 20 a week. But when I'm home, I work a lot because I'm kind of in catch up mode. But I've never dreaded a Monday since I went off on my own. And I think that's really important. Like, find something where there's that intersection of passion and commerce that you can make some money from, but you're also excited about it. And I mean, I know you've had people on that talk about like running a site about chainsaws or lawnmowers or whatever, and that's great if you're passionate about it, but if you're not, don't start one.
I love that monetizable passion. That's a good way to look at things. So, Tim, this is a long time coming. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate having you on, and I hope people got a lot of value from it.
Well, thanks, Jared. I'm a big fan and looking forward to seeing you in the future sometime in person again.
Me too. Me too. Looking forward to it. All right. Talk soon, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey there, thanks so much for listening to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Did you know that Jared and I are members of a private group called the Niche Pursuits Community? And today I want to share with you how you can join for just $1. The Niche Pursuits Community is a private members area for niche online publishers to mastermind and grow their businesses together. We hold weekly calls live with experts where you can ask questions. These experts share tips on Amazon Influencer, Google Discover, building email newsletters, getting traffic from Facebook, and other strategies to grow your online business. You'll also be assigned a mastermind group of 4 or 5 other people in a similar stage in business as you. Dive deep into your business issues and get your problems solved. If you use coupon code PODCAST at checkout, you'll get your first month for just $1. Go ahead and give it a try. Come join me, Jared, and lots of other digital entrepreneurs inside my private group at community.nichepursuits.com. And be sure to use coupon code PODCAST. I'll see you on the inside.